Hi everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. We are incredibly excited and honored that Sara Mail agreed to be our first interview for Life Between the Notes. We are also thrilled that the Reading Musical Foundation is supporting her interview with their sponsorship. The Reading Musical Foundation has advanced and advocated for music education and appreciation in Berks County since 1926. Signature programs of the foundation include RMF's scholarship program, which provides over $200,000 in annual scholarships to Berks County music students. Operation Replay, an instrument recycling program that provides used instruments with deserving student musicians, as well as an annual grant program that provides more than $300,000 for music-related projects in the greater Reading community. You can learn more about RMF at their website, www.readingmusicalfoundation.org, or by finding them on Facebook and Instagram at Reading Musical Foundation. We really hope you enjoy learning more about Sara. This was an inspiring interview, and personally, I came away from this with renewed energy in being a professional musician and the abundant opportunities that surround us in this area. We hope you enjoy learning more about Sara's life between the notes. Welcome everyone to Life Between the Notes, where we're going beyond the bio and bringing you interviews of your favorite South Central Pennsylvania musicians. I'm Kirsten Myers, and my co-host Morgan Davis is here today as well. Hello, Morgan.
Hello.
She's got her coffee. She's good to go. We are incredibly excited and honored today to have cellist Sara Mail joining us for our first interview. So hello, Sara, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
In case there's anyone out there who doesn't know who Sara is, I'm going to give you some background before we dig deeper to learn so much more about her and how she became the amazing musician that she is today. Sara received her Associate of the Arts in Music degree from Victoria Conservatory of Music in Canada, where she was presented the Principal Emeritus Prize. She earned her Bachelor of Music with high honors from Rutgers University and Master of Music from the Mannes College of Music in New York City. Sara is sought after as a chamber music recitalist and soloist, having performed in major venues in the US, Canada, Europe, and Asia. She is the founding cellist of the Lancaster-based Newstead Trio from 1993 to 2018. She also founded Duo Chiaroscuro in 2012 in collaboration with award-winning pianist Maria Corley. This ensemble has for over 8 years been dedicated to creating musical experiences that both touch and thrill their audiences. Recently, the duo decided to make their art available to those on the autism spectrum or with other distinct needs. They created a series entitled Silence Optional, which blends visual and musical components. Sara has also collaborates in chamber music programs with her husband and violist, Peter Keynote. Am I saying that correctly?
You are, yes.
Okay, great. A member of the New York Philharmonic. She is principal cellist of the York Symphony Orchestra, acting principal cellist of the Lancaster Symphony Orchestra, and chair of the LSO Board of Directors. She regularly performs with the Reading Symphony, Kennett Symphony, and Harrisburg Symphony. In 2018, Sara was a featured guest artist with the Reading Symphony, performing Joel Puckett's short stories for string quartet and orchestra. She also soloed in 2019 and 2020 with Allegro, the Chamber Orchestra of Lancaster. Sara is Senior Adjunct Assistant Professor of Cello at Franklin and Marshall College. She has directed chamber music programs and was involved in the successful accreditation to the National Association of Schools of Music for the Pennsylvania Academy of Music. Sara is under constant demand as a private teacher, working with cellists of all ages from Lancaster County and beyond. Her teaching reflects the pedagogy of her former teachers, Jim Hunter, Bernard Greenhouse, Zara Nelsova, and Timothy Eddy. Sara has also participated in programs that allowed her to study with Anna Bilsma,
Yep.
Janos Starker, and Channing Robbins. Over the last 25 years, her students have won competitions, awards, and performed with the most prominent regional orchestras. Sara's students have gone on to study cello in post-secondary institutions such as Oberlin, Ithaca, Duquesne, Cleveland Institute, King's College, Man's College of Music, and were selected to play in master classes for members of the New York Philharmonic, Ying Quartet, Cassatt Quartet, and Yo-Yo Ma, to name a few. Sara raised her 3 children in Lancaster and continues to appreciate the many unique and rich qualities of life in this diverse and artistically vibrant community. And after reading all of that, I think we're done with our interview. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny when you're reading it, I'm thinking, who are you describing? You know,
It's you.
sometimes, life just happens as you go from one day to the next, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so, like I said before, we are honored to have you here today. And so we kind of want to start from the beginning. So now, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Canada? Did you live there?
Yeah, yeah, I was actually born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is the province sort of above Montana, North Dakota. And I lived there until I was about 16. Um, and Saskatoon is a very, also very culturally healthy city in Canada, but it's um, relatively, certainly at that time, and maybe not as much now, but there's sort of more of a sense of it being an isolated community. So here, when we talk about the Lancaster area and the metro area, and then we talk about, the surrounding communities, there's sort of this big wash of population, and then you find yourself in a city like Philly, or, we're close to major cities. Where I grew up, it's literally that scene in the movie where you're in the airplane and you're flying over top and you see the circumference, you see the boundary, you see literally where there is city and there's no city. So while there were some opportunities there for me as a young musician, I actually ended up leaving when I was 16. Yeah.
You mean leaving
Saskatoon, yeah. So
okay,
so
with your
so
family or?
no. So my parents were supportive of cello. I started when I was about 8. I'd played piano for a little bit, but it wasn't really something that I was drawn to. And I started the cello, and I played for about 8 years, so from the age of 8 to 16. And during that time, I've counted it up before, but I think during that time I had 9 different cello teachers in
Wow.
8 years. It wasn't because I was a problem student, just so you know. They weren't passing me for, at least not from my perspective. But the thing was that the Saskatoon Symphony, which again was quite a remarkable institution for that community, was sort of a stepping stone orchestra. So many of the principal players that came in to play in the symphony would then be the leading teachers in the community. And so people would come in, play for a season or two, and then they'd be constantly doing auditions and trying to get up to the higher tier orchestra. So when I was about 16, I think my dad, I remember my mom and dad sort of talking to me and saying, listen, like, if you are thinking that you want to make a living as a musician, you're probably going to have to leave. I had friends who were flying to Calgary every weekend for lessons, and driving to Winnipeg 8 hours, every week. And my parents both working were kind of like, well, that's not really a feasible thing for us to take on. And so the summer before my senior year of high school, my mom and I drove to 2 different teachers. One was in Winnipeg, which is the neighboring province, or in the neighboring province, and the other was on the west coast of Canada in Victoria. And we were sort of, just seeing which teacher I might click with. And when I went to Victoria, that's when I met Mr. Hunter, and things just kind of rolled from there. I ended up boarding with a family for my final year of high school, attending the Victoria Conservatory of Music, and that was sort of at that time I wasn't sure that I wanted to go into music, but it was something I had to do in order to determine if this was the path I might want to take.
Oh.
So,
So at
yeah.
that point, I mean, obviously then you were very serious about it. Like what age were you, would you say, when you became that serious? Was it at 16, before that?
I think it was probably once I got there, and as soon as I got there and finishing my final year of high school, that was a big transition year. That was a rough year because new high school and not really knowing anybody. And my peer group became the people who attended the conservatory. I didn't really ever make strong connections in high school. I was kind of, as soon as I could leave, I get in my car and go down to the conservatory. And I think probably over the next 2 years, it really became clear to me that I wanted to make a living, to try to make a living playing the instrument. And that's the kind of the culture of the teacher that Mr. Hunter was. I still call him Mr. Hunter. I can't even say James Hunter. Um, he was sort of like he was one of the teachers in Canada that people went to. He kept a small studio. It maybe had 6 students at one time, but they would be a couple of high school students, and then there might be a somebody who already is a professional player but needed to come to him for some technical help or was having problems with injuries or something. He took the craft of teaching very seriously, and he looked at it as almost a trade, like he was preparing you for a trade. And my dad used to joke that being Hunter's student was like joining a convent because he was in control of everything you did. So I had 2 lessons a week for 4 years, 2 lessons a week. And he was, you couldn't, if a friend said, "Hey, I need a cellist for, I need you to play in a wedding, would you do it?" You couldn't do it unless Mr. Hunter was okay with it. In fact, I didn't play in a youth orchestra for several months once I started studying with him because he wanted to work on technical things. And he said, "No, we got to wait for you to get into an orchestra because when you're in an orchestra, it's very difficult to hear what you yourself are doing." And so he wanted to get the technical things underway, the work that I needed to do um, before sort of jumping into spreading myself really thinly with a
Mhm.
lot of extracurricular playing, I guess.
Right.
Yeah,
That's that's great. Um, so so after that, then so you were 16 when you went
right,
to
right. So,
Victoria.
hmm and I spent 4 years there, and I ended up doing I did my final year of high school, and then I did an Associate of Arts in Music diploma that was offered through the conservatory, which involved theory, ear training, some music history classes, and then I think I ended up taking like an English class and maybe one other class at Camosun College, which was a community college that was partnering with the conservatory to give this degree. And and then from there, I went to the east coast of the U.S. to Rutgers University, and they were able to transfer credits so that I entered a third year um, bachelor program in music performance.
Okay. So it was like mid degree
Right.
that
Yeah,
you
yeah. That was culture shock, I tell you, coming from the west coast of Canada, which, and I was so lucky because in Victoria, which is a stunningly beautiful city, but I could like on my lunch breaks walk to the beach and just like, have my lunch on the beach. And then I go to Rutgers, New Jersey, which is not so much idyllic
right.
and great for other reasons, but it was.
Sure, but comparatively, yeah.
Can you imagine my first few nights in Rutgers? I'd never heard a cicada. I had no idea what I'm talking
No.
about. I was so shocked. I was really lying awake, like with these huge eyeballs looking at the wall, like,
Yeah.
what is that?
Well, that would
Yeah.
be culture shock because that's like an
Was
alien
scary.
noise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I remember like hearing those when I was like 7 years old and crying because I didn't
Yeah.
know what was going on
So
outside.
creepy. Yeah. I had no
Yeah.
idea what I was getting myself into, but
Yeah.
anyway.
You know, Sarah, it's so interesting, you talking about that experience of like moving to get what you needed,
Yeah.
and then having a really influential teacher, you know, and the way that your
Hmm.
teacher approached like that craft of teaching,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, and maybe in not quite such an intense way, but I had a similar experience, you know, of needing to be figure out how to learn and be in a musical setting outside of the environment I grew up in, and was
Right.
really fortunate to have a teacher who I think was at least similar in concept.
Right.
And I wonder how many people, you know, it's just interesting how pinnacle that part of the transition is, you know, to
Oh,
have that.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's absolutely key. And I think, and what one thing I think we can say about our community that we live in now in the Lancaster area is that we are so fortunate to be able to find, really, really high quality instruction, not necessarily just in music, but sports and in visual arts and all sorts of areas that we are so fortunate um, to be able to find that because, you know, every now and then my mom still says to me, "Oh my gosh, maybe we shouldn't have, maybe you left home too young," because that was kind of big, to leave home at final year of high school, and I had my own car, and I was, and it was big.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, we're really fortunate here to have the resources that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, and so then your education, I mean, it was very focused. I mean, it was
Very focused.
musically focused. Like, were you involved in any other things? Like, did you do any sports? Did you,
No,
or
I mean before I moved to Victoria, I like up until I guess eighth grade, I did basketball and track, but then it was kind of like it was just too much. I just had to focus on one thing. Um, and then certainly once I was in Victoria, I all I did was practice. That was what I did. And I have to say that I've never been somebody that can sit down and do 4 to 6 hours a day. I find that really, really, really difficult. I was not the person that was, you know, putting that in, but I was in a way. I mean, I would still go to the conservatory and practice maybe 3 hours tops. Then I found it was just counterproductive. Um, and but I didn't really have any other. I mean, the people I hung out with were people who were doing the same thing. Between the youth orchestra and there was a chamber music program and um, you know coursework that I had to keep up with and playing exams. I mean, we had at the conservatory we had to do performance exams twice a year where we had to play like tons of technical things, and there just really wasn't time to really do anything else.
Mhm.
wow, yeah. And so were how was that for your family? Now, did you have any brothers? Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have a older brother and older sister. So both of them were sort of out of the house when I left. So yeah, my parents kind of experienced like everybody just kind of busting out at the more or less the same time.
Wow.
Um,
Is that hard for them?
I mean, I think there was something that was hard about it in a way. Um, it's always difficult looking back um, to try to see to try to remember emotions when you were looking back. Like I remember looking forward obviously to going home, and my parents would come and visit me. Um, if I did a recital or something, they'd try to come. So, I was home for Christmas. But one thing I loved about it was I would always drive. So the first summer I went, my dad and I drove. So he's driving one car, I'm driving the other, and we're driving in tandem, through the
Yeah.
Rocky Mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then oftentimes, he would come pick me up and drive me back. So there's some really special memories there. But I think, you know, sooner or later, I mean, you get to the point where, you know, you find other ways to be in touch with family other than um, being in the same room, you know. And obviously back then, I mean, it wasn't quite prehistoric, but we didn't really have the, you know, the FaceTime and all that kind of stuff, right? So it was a little different. Lots of letter writing, and I still have letters, you know, that my dad wrote me and my mom wrote me, and those kinds of things become really special.
Yeah, to have something tangible like that
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
look back on.
Yeah.
And yeah, wow. Um, so had you ever considered any other career? I mean, it seems like it was like a straight path.
You know, it's it's funny. I think no, at the time I didn't. And you know, I really and I think about this a lot. I was really, really fortunate for the teachers that I had at every point. Really fortunate. I mean, Mr. Hunter was kind of a guru, and somebody else I have to mention that I had that was a really important mentor for me was Stuart Nelson, and he was the conductor of the youth orchestra in Victoria, and he also taught music history class at the conservatory. He was retired principal bass of the London Symphony, and he London, England, and he retired. And then came over to Canada and start. And one of his dreams was to establish, you know, a top-notch youth orchestra. So I stepped into a program that was incredibly well established with really, really successful and dedicated and generous teachers. Stuart Nelson was this like huge he would have been like 60, 65, late 60s when I met him. Rode a Harley, shocking red hair. He was really intimidating, and I used to have orchestral excerpts lessons with him in a room that not much bigger than a closet, and I used to like be so nervous for those lessons, you know, days in advance. But he ended up being, you know, kind of a good friend and supporter. And I mean, I was just really fortunate at every step to have that kind of influence. So I think that I recognizing that I was able to study with certain teachers sort of made me feel even more dedicated to trying to make it work for myself. You
Mhm.
know, to really put in as much work as I could to take advantage of the opportunities. But I will say, in the last few years, and even with the pandemic, um, I do sometimes think about other career choices. Because let's face it, like being a freelance musician is pretty darn uh, tricky.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I've met a couple of people who are musicians who have gone back, in particular nursing school and
Mhm.
things like that. And I've thought of doing, I mean, 5 years ago, I was seriously considering, um, you know, doing something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and I still sort of think of it, and whenever I meet somebody that's done it, you know, there are people who have now a nursing degree and they work as a nurse during the day, and then they can still gig at night. And I'm thinking, well, that's intense. There's nothing easy about that lifestyle, but there's something very fascinating about switching career like that
Mhm.
midway.
And I think a lot, well, and certainly in the past few years too, there are a lot of people who have, I mean, not just musicians, but you know, there's a lot of, well, you know, I mean, since you know the pandemic had changed so
Right.
many things with the, yeah, the way we communicate
Mhm.
and live our lives, that you know, changing things up, and you know, is this working? Is this not working? Is it going to work in the future?
Right.
Uh, and
Right.
that kind of thing. So
Yeah. It's really interesting too, because I think you talk about, you know, it's not an easy life maybe to, like, if you're nursing and you're doing nursing and you're have rehearsing in the evenings and concerts and things, but I think too, I know a lot of musicians who have added that second career so that they can take the pressure out of doing what we do, because it's
Right.
changed so much. I think for some people, and then also with the pandemic, obviously it's changed. You know, and there's something to be said for allowing yourself to have some of the enjoyment back with the lack of pressure from it being your primary source of income.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
I mean, the the pressure is pretty intense, and I think I, you know, figuring out how to manage the stress and
Mhm.
still play your best. And I think, the other facet of career for me has always been teaching.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's funny because when I was in college, and certainly with the training I did in Victoria and then moving and studying with Greenhouse and then with my master's, it was always I always thought that I would sort of be an orchestral musician right out of college, that I would be doing auditions. And the way things worked out, I ended up playing in a piano trio, which was sort of my main thing for a long time. We were in residence for, oh gosh, 15 years at least. And so that was that. So I ended up doing a lot more teaching and playing chamber music, um, and now I'm hardly doing. I mean, I do some chamber music, but the trio no longer plays together, and I've sort of started very late in life, really, doing a lot more orchestral playing and orchestral auditions and managing teaching with being, trying to prepare tons of repertoire any given week. I mean, if you're playing, you have two orchestra gigs in a month, that's a lot of music
Mhm.
to make yourself responsible for. And balancing, taking care of what you need just as a human, and if and what your family needs, and, um, you know, taking time for yourself without feeling guilty about doing it is rough.
Mhm.
It's pretty hard. It's like I hope someday to sort of figure all that out, but it's like a constant struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
Balance is tricky. It's
Yeah.
I remember asking a teacher one time about balance, or maybe it was someone, maybe I didn't, there was a small class I was in. Um, it was like a week long class. And I don't know if it was me that asked the question or someone else, but I remember the answer because there was only like six of us in the room. And I remember the answer was sort of like, balance doesn't exist. They said, well, how do you balance it all? And the teacher was like, that's not a thing. It's
Yeah.
like sometimes you feel like you're getting it and then something will
Yeah.
change and the whole thing will be different. And it's like something about that was very helpful to me to think like, oh, well, sometimes it'll feel really good and sometimes it'll feel
Yeah.
like I don't know what I'm doing.
Right. You don't have
Mhm.
to reach like the point where you have everything figured out. It's just
Mhm.
you're constantly adjusting. Yeah.
yeah, you're always
Yeah.
adjusting.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I really enjoy hearing other people, not enjoy hearing other people's struggles, but I enjoy hearing people be honest about the difficulties of balancing what we do,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
feeling like you're doing a good job at it, but then also enjoying your day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard that, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once,
Right.
Mhm.
like you can, pursue certain things at certain times of your life and that kind of thing. And that's just kind of, especially like if you have a family, children, or,
Hmm.
what,
Hmm.
and because I mean, your focus has to be somewhere. It can't be, at all you can't multitask
Right.
everything, your entire life.
Right. Right. Right.
Well, how old are your children now?
So my son is going to be 24 in July, and my daughters, I have twin daughters, they're turning 21.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. It goes by
Yeah.
very fast. And my kids are all athletic. They're not I mean, they didn't pursue music really past, sort of singing in a children's choir and playing violin at the elementary level. The girls played cello for a little bit. I have the cutest picture ever of them playing cello, which is just as close as we're gonna get. But anyway, I think you know, they were around music always and have gone to many, many concerts, many, many rehearsals. So I feel like they've got sort of a dose of some good music vitamins, but not their thing. So my son played baseball up through college, and my daughters play softball. So
Okay.
my other life is like softball baseball mom, which is one of my favorite roles ever. I love it, absolutely love it. So, and there are I've I have to confess to being, when I first started teaching before I had children, I was so frustrated with the students that would say in the spring, well, I have to change my lesson time because I have lacrosse or I have, whatever. And I would get so frustrated and coach, I can't miss this and I can't miss that. And I'm thinking, gee, and while that's still, something I have to work around with some of my students who are doing a couple of different types of activities, um, I've really come to appreciate the similarities between being a musician and being an athlete. And
Mm.
for example, this past semester, I learned so much from my kids and from what they go through, what kind of training they go through, what kind of mental preparation they go through. And in fact, um, I've found some of the books that my kids read extremely helpful. My daughter Effie was pointed out a book to me that's called She the Confident. And it's about, it's designed for softball players, and it's just about the mental game and preparing your confidence and tactics you can use to play your best. And I'm thinking this is so similar to being a musician. The only thing that's real, I mean, it's kind of like our instrument is our playing field, and how we train, how we warm up, how we think, how we do drills. It's so, so crucially important. And I think that I mean, I could talk about this for hours, just the parallels that are so fascinating. And I think that in my teaching now, I've learned over the past few years, and again, in particular, when my son went to college, and just seeing, some of the team building things they do, the books they read as a team, drills, their work ethic, and I've tried to use that in some of the lessons now that I teach, and talking, especially to high school age kids,
Mhm.
because, quite frankly, being an athlete is cool. And being a musician doesn't necessarily get that label, we don't necessarily get that recognition for the physical feat. Um, and so if you can draw parallels for students and show them that, hey, like trying to get this finger action absolutely precise, that's learning a skill. The same way as, making sure that your stance in the batter's box is, making sure you're using your hips, it's exactly the same thing. And it's been a really interesting revelation for me, just that I've learned from my kids. It's really fascinating.
Mhm.
This is so interesting to me. This was like a big driver for me doing my yoga teacher training.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I'm doing like a mindfulness meditation coaching certification right now. But athletes, I mean, I just feel like we missed the mark for a lot of years, understanding that we should be training all these components of ourselves at the same time. That athletes are so open about really training everything about what they do, what they're eating, how they're thinking, how they're resting, how they're training their mindset going into
Mhm.
a game or a match or whatever. So I think I'm with you. I think it's totally fascinating.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be amazing to just kind of like build a training program that was more holistic like this, that was
Yes.
based on what we know from the sports world? And like you said, I mean, their diet, they're, making
Mhm.
sure they get sleep, like, they have a curfew, for goodness sake, when they're playing tournaments. They can't stay, they control their behavior so that
Yes.
they can reach their peak performance.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
it's, I mean, we talk a lot about the stress of being a musician, and like, having to, play a solo in an orchestra concert, or perform for an audition. Those are very high stress situations, but it's so similar to being, um, in a position in a game where, you have to, one swing of the bat and you can win, or you lose. And it's so similar, and I wish that I had been thinking this way earlier in my life
Hmm.
about practicing.
Yeah. I
Mm,
agree too. Yeah. And, you know, and in the past few years, like I've done a lot just with exercise and working out, lifting weights. Like that's been a big thing for me. And like, and, you know, and learning about and form and how you need to, you know, and you have to get the basics right and that kind of thing before you can move on to other things. And just right, like building your body, you know, and feeding your mind and all of those things. It's all related, and your body is part of your instrument, and
Exactly.
you need to take care of that. I mean, that this is where it all starts, you know. And but yeah, it's there are a lot of different correlations with health and exercise and yeah,
And
team sports.
and for musicians, you know, often I've said, you know, like, you know, teaching at summer festivals and thinking, you know, we should have yoga classes.
Yeah.
We should have like a yoga break in the rehearsals. We spend so much time sitting.
Yes.
And whether, you know, like, you know, I had a rehearsal last night in Allentown. So I drive an hour and a half, go to the
mhm.
rehearsal, sit for 3 hours, and then drive an hour and a half back. It's just crazy.
Right. And then
Yeah.
that can lead to, like, you know, well, tension, building tension
Yep.
in the body, and then injury, you know, if it gets, you know, to that point.
Right.
Mhm.
It's fascinating. And you know, if I ever, I mean, yeah, now that we're talking, I realize how inspired I am about this project. It would be really interesting to just spend some time researching, sort of developing a method of movement for players
Mhm.
before they practice, and talking about, you know, what how important it is to eat healthily, and make sure you're
Yeah.
sleeping, and because that's these are all the things we don't do, particularly when we're in college and we're in the intense time of preparing lessons and preparing recitals, and we are so not sleeping and eating right, and you know,
Mhm.
so it's
As
very
you're saying, yeah, that in college especially, and you think college athletes, you're talking about your children.
right,
And they're
exactly.
doing that already. They are
They're doing all
understanding
that.
those
Right.
connections for themselves.
Yeah.
And we're missing something. And then the other thing you mentioned that really struck a chord was, I don't know if either of you have read Atomic Habits by James Clear.
That's
Um,
on my list. I haven't read
it's
it.
really fantastic. And I love his weekly newsletter, but he played, and it's not sports based, but he played baseball in college. And so he will reference that quite a bit as like some of where his references come from. And he, part of his book, and I think this is where I got it from, he talked about that warm up to create flow, like warm up to create. And I have just been like obsessed with this idea. I'm not sure how to like create it for myself yet,
Mhm.
but it's like the idea that like you have a thing that you do that puts you in the right place mentally and physically, and that even if you don't feel like doing it, it's a prescribed amount of time, and by the time you're done, your
Right.
body and your brain are on the same page. um it's just like fascinating to me the way that that could be applied and then adapted as like we grow
Right.
and change. Yeah. hmm but um that the ideas are out there, we don't correlate well as musicians.
Yeah. We need to do a uh what do you call that? Like a test study. What do you call that when you like you volunteer to do a study and then they give people placebos and then they
Yeah.
totally blanking.
uh Trial, like a
A
trial.
trial. Yeah, we need to
hmm
do that. We need to have some musicians that we don't apply any of these tactics, and others that we do, and see how they
Mhm.
feel. And it's really because, you know, we all play because when we're playing at our best, there's nothing there's nothing in that feels better than that, than having like a really great performance or an inspire or playing with inspiring musicians. Like that's why we keep doing it. And so, wouldn't it be great to just increase the odds that our successes are going to be more numerous than those concerts where we just kind of feel, well, meh, you know, it was, I wasn't able to get my focus, or I wasn't able to really emote or feel comfortable, or,
Mhm.
yeah, it's great. And the other thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I could spend all day trying to get right, is practicing how to practice, just how to practice. Oops, I'm getting a phone call. Standby. Um, uh, anyway, um, like how to make your practice. The funny thing is, I'll never forget a teacher telling me in college, because I would, I come for a class, and how are you doing? Well, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't have time to do anything. And he said, the funny thing is, college is when you do have time to do things. You don't realize that once you start working, then you don't have time. And
Mhm.
one of your greatest goals is going to be to figure out how to practice efficiently.
Mhm.
And that is such another fascinating subject.
Right. Yeah. Efficiency in practice is,
And it
yeah.
comes down to, I think it comes down to, this sounds crazy, but I think it comes down to practicing so that you don't make mistakes.
Mhm.
Don't so be so in control of everything you're doing in your practice that you simply don't make a mistake.
Mhm.
Um, for string players in particular, that's well, for everyone really, but I mean for us, to misplace a finger and we're out of tune. So you so my a lot of students say, well, how do I improve my intonation? I said, well, you just don't play out of tune. And it sounds ridiculous, but that's the truth. You
Right.
slow things down, you listen, you get your focus, you use a tuner, you use a drone, whatever, but you just have to play in tune.
Mhm. Right. Well, and it comes down to being, we throw this word around a lot these days, but being mindful and focus, like you said, which I don't know, especially these days, seems very difficult to achieve with all of the distractions that we have going on. But when I am playing my best, I am only focused on the music that I am making. I am
Right,
not worried about who's listening. I'm not worried about, I'm and it's just you're in the zone, right?
right.
And yeah, and it's just being aware and only focused on what you are doing.
Yeah. Having your head in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because as soon as you're distracted by something else, but yeah,
Yeah.
we have to bring that into our practice. And really, a 20-minute practice session can, with that kind of focus, can be certainly more beneficial than a 3 hour of,
Exactly.
oh, I'll go look at my phone, oh, I'm going to do some homework, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you ended up in Lancaster.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I ended up playing in a piano trio that became in residence at the so we met in college, pianist and violinist, and we ended up being in residence at the Pennsylvania Academy of Music. Um, the violinist happened to be the son of the founders, and he and I got married. So that was how that happened. And so yeah, we were here for. I've been here since '93,
Mhm.
um, and yeah,
And you
so
stayed.
I stayed. Yeah. Well, honestly, again, here I am. I'm an American citizen now. I still have my Canadian citizenship, but I, again, never thought I would be anything other than a Canadian citizen. I mean, I thought I might go to school in the States and then go back to Canada originally. But as we all know, things are rarely, especially at that time of your life, things can take drastic turns. And so, but Lancaster, this area is a wonderful place for families. It's a Lancaster City has really become culturally extremely rich.
Mhm.
And so it's sort of a desirable place to live, I think, in many ways.
Yes, that it's also, it's close to the metro areas of
Yeah, yeah,
Philly, Baltimore, New York.
yeah, yeah. So again, we're really fortunate. And you walk downtown Lancaster, and it's just, nice restaurant after interesting galleries and shops and vintage places, and it's bookstores, and we're really
Yeah.
fortunate in that respect.
Yeah. Mhm. What is one of your most favorite things about being a musician in this area.
Well, you know what I've come to appreciate, though it's also maybe sort of like, I think a lot of things with being a freelance musician, what you might call a favorite thing can also be um, a uh, not, something that's a challenge. But I like that that I'll often get emails asking me to play for things that I didn't see coming. I like that part of being freelance. I like that sort of email where it's like, hey, can you come play here? You can come play there. I like that. Um, I mean, when I was playing with the Newstead Trio, I loved. I mean, there was a time where we had management and we were doing sort of road trips and, you know, driving to communities that we'd never heard of and playing concerts and just meeting people and uh, playing in different venues. That was really fun. Um, and I think now what I appreciate the most about being a musician is just sort of the unpredictability of what a concert can be, or what an audience response can be, or meeting new people, or meeting new musicians that you haven't played with before. Being inspired by somebody's solution to a problem that affects all of us, like keeping a extra black outfit in your car in case you forget your pants when you drive 2 hours from home to play you know, you know what I mean? It's
Oh,
like
Mhm.
I've showed up
the
to a
gig
gig
bag.
without my oboe, so yeah,
So
been there.
yeah, I like the community of musicians. I think again in Lancaster, this area, we have some really top-notch musicians. And
Lots of opportunities.
yeah, yeah. And I'm really enjoying my work with the symphony, Lancaster Symphony. I This is a whole new learning curve for me, being on a board, chairing a
Yeah,
board,
so
and
when did you
I
start
feel like
that?
um so let's see. Our current executive director, Guy McIntosh, I think he invited me to be on the board in April of 2020. So I joined the board just, during the pandemic. And then I started chairing the education committee for the symphony, and then became board chair in, I believe, July of 2020. No, 2021. July 2021, I
It's like
think.
I don't even know what year it
It's
is.
all just kind of like,
That whole year is that way.
yeah, exactly. So, and the symphony's in a position where a lot is completely new. We're sort of, you know, as 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 is the case for many regional orchestras or even arts organizations, the pandemic, as horrible as it was there is a silver lining for many of the organizations, that it was a time to pause and really look at how things are going and what direction you want to head. And I think that as we have a new executive director, we have almost a completely new board. Um, we are looking for a new music director. This has been a really, really exciting time to sort of rebrand the symphony, keep what has been working, and obviously after 75 seasons, I mean, it's an institution in itself. There's a lot of wonderful things about the organization, and then there were a lot of things that we felt we wanted to sort of change and reconnect with the community, and that's become it's a lot of work. Um, and for, again, with orchestras, it's always a struggle to figure out, how to get your audience to come, how to broaden your audience, how to diversify your audience. But I think these are challenges that the current board and executive director and staff are really putting as priorities. So it's been it's funny because I think that for me to step into doing sort of I always wanted to volunteer. I could never find time. And it was, I was always thinking, well, I got to go and help out at Water Street Rescue Mission or do something, for the Y or whatever. But I've ended up becoming involved as a volunteer with something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is, the health of an orchestra, just in general. How do we promote an orchestra at a time where, you know, even the historically traditional audiences are turning more to wanting to watch something in the comfort of their own home, seeing something virtually, joining a concert that's happening in Vienna, because it's being broadcast. It's a really significant challenge. But if we're going to, I feel like if we're going to, as teachers, encourage students to follow a career path as a musician, then we really have to be dedicated to the health of the regional orchestras that they're going to end up playing in. And so, yeah, so that's been very, very enlightening for me, and just I'm inspired again to sort of study how successful regional orchestras, why they're successful, what makes them successful, how do they best fundraise, how do they what are how do they tap into their community. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and I'm
So,
sure there's a learning curve to all of
oh,
that.
it's crazy. I mean, even this morning I'm sitting waiting for my husband at an appointment, and I'm reading the little book of boards, to try to, like, just keep my head, again, it's the challenge of staying focused on what's really important, and not letting a barrage of unimportant things take up residence in your brain waves.
Which is
That's yeah,
increasingly more and more difficult.
yeah,
It
it is,
seems.
for
But I
sure.
think it's
Yeah,
such like important work that you're doing at the symphony. I think it's important, like you talk about how culturally rich our area is, and then considering the challenge of how can an orchestra fit into that, because it should be able to, but it might mean that we
exactly,
have to adjust what we've done for the last 75 years
exactly.
as classical musicians. And it's exciting to think about, how change can be good in that
Hmm.
respect. And I just, from the last LSO concert that I played in, which was earlier this month,
Hmm.
um, seeing the enthusiasm of the musicians and the audience, and seeing good things happen that way, and knowing that
Yeah,
good things are happening, right things are happening, and when you
yeah,
create momentum, what
yeah,
follows that. So I just
yeah.
think what you're doing, you're already seeing, pay out from that. But it just is, we stay in Lancaster because of the culture, because we have those things available to us. But then, the responsibility as musicians is to figure out how we fit in.
Hmm. And yeah, absolutely. And I think too that, and this is a topic that's discussed a lot. It's like, how do you get somebody to become excited to come to a classical music concert?
Mhm.
I mean, how do you get somebody to really think that this is a valuable use of their time to come out of the house, come to a concert? Because there's nothing like a live performance. There is nothing as exciting as a live performance. And it's just, how do you, because I would think that most people that come to a concert that's exciting would like to repeat the experience. But
Right.
I think that there are a lot of people that think, oh, well, it's not my thing. I don't want to come to a
Well,
classical music concert.
and I think that stems from music education, right?
Hmm.
In our schools, and getting out there, and you have to show the kids
Hmm.
what it's like, what that experience can be like. And I don't know. That's, to me, that's where it would
Yeah,
start.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think even like with my kids, I know they would enjoy.
Yeah.
I mean, they've come to some concerts, but it wouldn't necessarily be something that they seek out, you know,
Right.
as young 20-year-olds. But it's just so exciting. It's like trying to get somebody to read a book that you think is fascinating, and once they start, they can't stop turning the
Mhm.
pages, but they wouldn't necessarily have taken it off the shelf.
Bridging the
It
gap.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be an ongoing challenge for sure.
Well, and so speaking of like music education and teaching, um, do you would you say you like prescribe to a certain like philosophy in teaching? Is there something that you want to make sure that you impart to the students that you teach?
You know, it's funny. I started teaching in 1993, like formally. And this past I guess it was during the pandemic that I started um wanting to just play more and wanting to make time to take auditions and prepare excerpts and things like that. And so I did scale down the number of private students that I have, and um I had up until that point accepted almost any student really that wanted to study, because I remember one thing from Mr. Hunter, and that was he would always say, you really can't, you have to you have to go into teaching a student assuming that they can be great at the instrument, right? That they have potential. You can't say, oh, this person doesn't have potential. So I think I do look at all my students as being potentially capable of being fine players, whether they have a great musical talent, whether they have a great physical talent, whether they don't seem to have a great ear, whatever. I just everything is possible. That's how I look at all the students. Um, and I think one of the greatest things that a teacher can give a student is the ability to do that, to come across a problem and have the tools to try to figure out how to solve it. Um, so I'm so I'm I guess I try to encourage people to develop a thought process. I think students, in my experience, are a little late to take control of their own practicing. I think that we sort of wait sometimes too long, and we wait until a student is in high school before we really expect them to be solving problems on their own. But I think I try to, even with younger students, get them to really listen and to really think about what they're doing, and think about what where they are with their playing and where they want to be. And I do try to, um, you know, always in the back of my mind is to have somebody leave the room a more experienced player than when they entered it. Doesn't always work.
Mhm.
You know, it doesn't always work. But I know that if there, you know, could be a criticism of my teaching, I think that I don't put I don't really put a lot of pressure on kids. I don't put pressure on them to do this audition, that audition. I don't tell them they have to do this, they have to do that. I sort of am looking for the students that are going to come to me eventually and say, hey, you know, like this is what I want to do. And I say, great, this is how we get there, you know. Um, so I will say that you know, I've done a lot of what I would call recreational cello teaching, teaching students that really have been upfront about not wanting to go into music or wanting to pursue it, but they still want to learn about it. As I move forward, I'm trying to focus more and more on the students that do want to go into music and that do need to prepare college auditions, and that are or that are at least wanting to keep that door open. That's my private students. The students that I teach at F&M, at one point I was teaching at Millersville, F&M, and E-Town. Now I'm just down to F&M. I just had to, I just needed to sort of pare things back a bit. And um, the students at F&M are largely students that are, you know, majoring in, you know, environmental studies or whatever, astrophysics, and they come for lessons because they always played as kids, and they wanted to keep doing it. And you know, I can make those lessons feel relevant in terms of what I can give them if I have that philosophy that you know, okay, these might not necessarily be professional musicians, but it's my responsibility to give them tools to solve problems so that they can, once they leave, continue to improve and maybe become players who play in community orchestra, or form a little string quartet just for their own personal enjoyment. So,
Yeah, and you have to meet them where they are.
yeah, oh,
uh,
absolutely.
and yeah, and be realistic of, how does this fit into their life?
And
And
it's funny because you mentioned something earlier about, sometimes 20 minutes of practice can be better than 3 hours if you're mindful. And that's another thing I try to really impart to my students. It's like, I'm listening to me that you practiced. I practiced 3 hours last night.
mhm,
Um, it could be great, but it could be
yeah.
just kind of like, oh, shoot, now we have to
Oh
undo all
yeah.
this, all these
Yeah.
habits that were formed. So it's, again, it's teaching people at any stage how to practice,
Mhm.
how to listen. Isn't it remarkably difficult to get people to
Mm,
hear what they're doing? I mean,
yes.
it really is remarkably difficult. And I know I fall into that myself when I'm practicing. I can find that I'm repeating a shift and then I'm literally thinking about what's on the grocery list. I mean, it's so hard
Yeah.
to stay focused. So, I mean, that's a constant struggle,
Yeah.
but yeah. So teaching is something that to be completely honest, I think I sort of reached my limit. I think I became kind of burnt out.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm trying to scale it back so I can approach it with sort of renewed inspiration.
Mhm.
And that for me, that might mean fewer students
Right.
and being
But
able
just
to really,
refocusing.
yeah, refocusing. Yeah.
What are you most proud of, what you have accomplished in your career so far?
Gosh, now if you hadn't said tagline in my career, I would have said my
Okay.
kids.
All right. Well,
Um,
okay, good first.
But because you know what, and I don't know if my kids will listen to this podcast, and I do have to clarify one thing. Even though my kids were like, disciplined in terms of athletics, they absolutely do and did party. I just have to say that because I don't want people, my kids might listen and think, "Oh, mom, you portrayed us as sports geeks," you know. So anyway, they do have a good time also. But so in my career, what am I most proud of? Um, Gosh, I'm not, you know, quite frankly struggle with confidence. So it's really hard for me to like say something like that. One of the, I think I've, I'm sort of proud of the fact that I've started doing auditions at my
Mhm.
ripe old age. I really am. Like I recently did the audition in York, and then I just recently did one in Allentown, and just preparing for that and showing up for me, just
Yeah.
to show up. My goal was just in York and in Allentown was just I just want to show up and I want to play the first round and feel like I'm not losing control because of nerves
Mhm.
or feeling like, what am I doing here with all these young whippersnappers? And so just, I guess being proud of being able to set aside the time to prepare for something that is meaningful to me. Um, Having said that, I don't want to do that anytime soon again because it was really,
Stressful.
it's stressful. Um, I guess also I'm proud of students, what students have accomplished, and where they've been able to go and get places and um, you know sort of be able to get into a school that they wanted to get into so that they can then start studying with somebody who will then take care of getting them to the next level, and um, helping them achieve their goals.
And for me, like actually, like looking through your bio, and I knew that you had your duo with Maria. Um,
Hmm.
I I don't know. That's pretty special too.
Oh my gosh, yes. And any collaboration, I mean, I don't know, Maria would be a great person to sit down and talk to. She is absolutely fascinating and um, one of the strongest people I think that I know, and a great friend and wonderful, wonderful musician. And she's a fellow Canadian, though we didn't know each other in Canada. But yeah, we really love playing together. We started this duo chiaroscuro. Oh gosh, it's probably I don't know how many years, but it's been sort of sporadic. And we um, our most recent endeavor was this silence optional series that we started to think about. We were inspired by Xenia concert series in Toronto. It's a string quartet that started doing programs for autistic audiences. And so we thought, well, goodness, that's, that's a community of people that don't come to concerts a lot of times, children with special needs or even adults with special needs, because they might make a noise or they might need to leave or they might need to move or they might. So that's something that, we're hoping to continue to focus on and do more and more concerts. We did a virtual concert for an organization. I think it was in Chicago. I can't remember. It's terrible. And they aired what we did, and then they sort of had a physical therapist or a therapist, a music therapist, working with their audience and sort of giving them activities to do while they were listening to our concert.
That's
And so
great.
we'd like to do more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because again, it's how do you make, how do you take away the sort of the boundaries that exist in a concert setting, that you don't think you can't talk, you're not supposed to move, you can't make a noise, you're not supposed to crinkle the candy wraps. And, some of that really is important, but some of that also is viewed as sort of restrictive for people that want to bring kids who might, scream in the middle of the concert or things like that. So, yeah, we
Take
still,
away some of the boundaries.
yeah, it's a work in progress. I mean, anytime I can collaborate in chamber music, yeah, I'm in.
Absolutely, I agree. And that's also kind of like with this podcast too, like wanted to collaborate with someone else, and because of the connection that we've been missing for the past few years,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But just kind of bringing things together and working with other people in ways that we wouldn't have before.
Right. I mean, even just in this conversation, I mean, both of you are musicians that I mean, we sort of run across each other and cross each other's paths, and we know each other on a certain level. But I mean, this is a really inspiring conversation for me. And I'm thinking, we should have like a club or something,
Like a book club.
like a book club, and just like have a topic, and we could go on and on and on for hours. And I think it's a really important support for people and just community. And as people that from one community to another and freelance, and we all do that, but we kind of feel like we're doing sort of drive-bys. We drop in and then we leave, and it would be nice to meet some of these people that we're playing with on a deeper level.
Right.
So
Yeah. And don't you think too, maybe it's like another thing athletes sort of have figured out is that social.
exactly. Exactly.
Keeping it a friendly place, because it
Right.
doesn't have to be the cutthroat
Exactly.
that it is in some areas, which I don't necessarily feel that here. I mean,
No,
out
yeah.
there, but I also kind of stay in my own little hole. But yeah, no, I agree. So
Yeah.
yeah, we need music club now.
That's right.
I think this has been really inspiring, like Sarah
We
said.
kind of went all over the place. I hope it wasn't too this has been a lot of fun.
And thank you for volunteering to be our
Yeah.
first.
I'm the guinea pig.
I sent you that email, and I was like hovering over the keyboard over hitting send.
Oh, are you kidding? When I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But again, I thought, but why me? It's like,
no,
yeah,
you're the
that's
perfect
kind of
person.
Well, anyway, it's a great idea, and I'll look forward to hearing the other interviews, not mine. I don't like listening to my own.
It's hard with editing, and you're like, oh yeah, it's a little painful, but yeah.
But I do have to say that you're both inspiring to me in the work that you do, and also in how you keep up with the yoga and the weights and all that. I am just like, I'm waiting for, I can hit that a little bit, and then it kind of like you have a busy week and then you can't.
Yeah.
But when you start to get that feeling like you're turning into a marshmallow, so that's very good.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And for those of you who are listening, if you have anyone in mind that you would like us to bring on and chat with, and if they're willing, you can always email us. Like I said in our first episode, we do have an email, which is lifebetweenthenotes@gmail.com. In addition, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So thank you, Morgan, and thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.